Welcome, readers and listeners. Today I'll be reading from one of my short stories entitled Across the Creek. It's a tale of love and mystery, wrapped in a cloak of darkness that is a wooded forest. Won't you come along with me? Please, sit down with your favorite drink and dim the lights. The story is about to begin. A word of warning before we start. This tale is not finished. I continue to write it as time goes on, as it is loosely based on real-life events. The first few chapters are complete, and those are what I'll be reading for you during this first series of podcasts. Now, sit back and open your mind as we try to uncover what lies across the creek. This short story is dedicated to my wonderful wife, Cynthia, without whom this story would never have been written. Across the Creek by R. Gonzalez. He will be with his friends, and that always feels like coming home. Stephen King, Dreamcatcher. 1. The pine trees passed like a picket fence in the car window as John and Jenna Robertson drove into the woods for their camping trip. They just had a group trip with some friends in a different section of the forest 2 weeks ago, but that experience left them feeling like they were babysitting rather than camping. Their friends, while good people at heart, could be selfish and couldn't handle their alcohol very well. Both nights were full of puking noises and loud drunken shouting that would have woken the heaviest of sleepers. This camping trip, however, was just for them, John and Jenna. It was their 3-year wedding anniversary. They started seeing each other 4 years ago after meeting at a wedding reception. He was friends with the groom and his entourage, and she was barely an acquaintance of the bride. She had been a +1 for an obscure friend on the bride's side, and only went to be supportive of said friend. If it had been any other person calling in a favor of that magnitude, she would have told him right where to stick it. The wedding had been nothing special. A bunch of sweaty people in a poor-looking community center on the side of the highway in a town you wouldn't notice if it were stuck to the bottom of your shoe. The whole thing felt cheap and sleazy. It almost seemed like the whole reason for the wedding was for the pictures and the booze. The decor was trashy, which consisted of 45 RPM records that have been painted over with runny water-based paint and hung in random locations. There were red and white crepe paper streamers that had been fashioned into a crude spiderweb on the ceiling. Jenna couldn't tell if this was intentional or not. Knowing that the darkest these people ever got was when they turned off the lights, she assumed not. To complete the look, there were mismatched Christmas icicle lights as far as the eye could see. They were going for a whimsical look, but with some of the lights being bright white and others being a dingy yellow, it fell short of the mark. The only thing trashier than the decorations was the music selection. It was a sickening jumble of classic rock, new country, country western, and hip-hop. Jenna, who had been to quite a few weddings where professional planners had been hired and was appalled by whoever puked DIY all over the place, asked who was in charge of setting up. If you asked her before she had said anything, she could have told you that she didn't mean any disrespect. That changed once she was given dirty looks by the bride as well as her bridesmaids. The maid of honor, a tall blonde girl whose makeup screamed high maintenance, opened her mouth in disgust and let it hang there for a second before she piped up. "We did," she said, looking like the next words out of her mouth were going to be, "Who the fuck are you?" One of the other bridesmaids, a short, fat girl with mousy brown hair that had been straightened except for her roots, spoke next. "We worked hard on it all day," she said, sounding wounded. It definitely looked like they had been working on it all day. All of the girls standing in front of her had beads of sweat on their faces, which had started to melt their makeup. There were stains under their arms that you could clearly see if they had lifted them up. Jenna noted that during the service, all of the girls kept their arms down with their hands in front of them the whole time. The tall blonde bimbo, however, appeared to be impervious of the heat and sweat and just stood there fuming. "Well, whose idea was the records?" Jenna asked, genuinely curious. Truth be told, she was offended that they had used actual records with actual music on them. She had been examining one of them earlier and saw that if it hadn't been painted over, it would have been a great David Bowie record. Now, it was just red with the name Jill written on it with silver Sharpie. The bride's eyes lowered to the floor at the question. She had begun to turn and walk away when the girl Jenna had come with to the wedding had chimed in. "What the fuck, Jenna? What's your problem?" she scolded. Jenna's friend rushed over to join the wedding party, which now consisted of nothing but bitches, according to Jenna. Apparently, the bride had come up with the decorations herself. She supposed it would have been nice to know before she ragged on the place, but she didn't know any of these people, and after receiving hostility in response to an innocent question, she decided that she didn't owe any of them anything. The only reason she stayed at the wedding was because she had come with someone else. She had her phone on her, and she could have called someone to pick her up, but she had hoped that her friend would come to her senses and see her side. She never did. After the party raged on and the guests got sloppy drunk, John and Jenna eventually found each other sitting at the bar, turning warm drinks over in their hands and wondering why they had agreed to show up to this thing in the first place. When the groom's father fell to the dance floor and split his lip, John shaded his face with his hand and turned back to face the bar. He inhaled deeply and let it out in a bellow of shame and exasperation. It was always the same with these people. Have a party, get drunk, do stupid shit, pretend like it didn't happen, do it again next week. The whole routine had gotten old. How many more times would he have to drive his stupid friends home? When were they going to grow up? "I don't think I'll have what he's having," John said to no one in particular. God, what a mess. He didn't think anyone could hear him over the loud music, and felt comforted by that notion. He could have been talking to the guy running the bar, who nodded and looked just as disgusted, but it was Jenna who responded. "I could have been camping," she said, looking over the bar where 5 more red records hung, spinning on cheap fishing line. She said it loud enough for John to hear, which snapped him out of the funk of embarrassment. He had to wonder how long she'd been sitting there. He'd been so focused on his friends that he hadn't noticed her at all. He looked at her for a second or two, trying to see if he recognized her, and also trying not to make it obvious that he was staring. Jenna put her drink on the bar and decided that she'd seen enough buffoonery. "I gotta get out of here," she said, standing up. She reached for her purse, which was slung over the back of her flimsy rental chair, and fished out her phone to check for notifications. She had missed 3 emails, all of them junk, a message from her mom, and a social media update from someone she used to work with a long time ago. "I take it you don't know these people," John said, cocking a thumb over his shoulder. No, he definitely didn't recognize her. He tried to look for a resemblance in her face to see what family she came from, but she didn't look like any of them. "Nope," Jenna said dismissively, fumbling her phone back into her purse. "That kind of makes 2 of us," John said, as he put down his drink. He suddenly felt ashamed to be drinking the same thing that turned the people behind him into the drooling idiots before him who were mistaking drunken stumbling for dancing. "I'm John," he said, and stuck out a hand to shake, which Jenna only looked at. She took in a deep breath and let it out with her eyes closed. She looked like she was about to give a book report from memory instead of an introduction. "Look, John, I'm sure you're a nice guy, but that's not why I'm here, okay? I'm here for—" She paused as she scanned the dance floor. Way in the back, being fondled by some guy in groomsman attire, was the friend she had come with. "That," she said, pointing a finger towards the oblivious couple. "Wow," he said, making his eyes comically wide and nodding slightly. It came out sounding like an Owen Wilson impression, which made him smile awkwardly. "I don't think they left any room for you over there," he said. Jenna rolled her eyes at this and looked at John. Once she saw that he wasn't like the other guys at this party, meaning that he wasn't making a fool of himself and actually looked pretty well put together, she dropped her guard just a little. She took in another deep breath through her nose, picking up the hints of spilled drinks and too much perfume. Just then, another drunken dancer took a tumble and dropped their bottle to the floor with a loud crash, which everyone stupidly applauded. "I know," she said, exhaling the deep breath and sounding defeated. She was still looking at John, and now it was her who was trying not to stare. She was still standing up when John got to his feet. Jenna was secretly surprised at how tall he was. He didn't look that tall when he was sitting down, she thought. Maybe it was just the chair. She looked over and saw that he was indeed sitting in a shorter seat. He laid a $5 bill on the bar and pushed it towards the bartender. Thanks for... He broke off for a minute, realizing that he didn't even know what it was he was drinking. Whatever this was, he said, gesturing to his nearly empty glass. He pushed his chair in and checked his phone for the time. It was earlier than he planned on leaving, but did he really want to stay and see what else was going to happen here? He thought not. You've got the right idea. I'm getting out of here too, he said. He looked back over to the girl and guy way back across the dance floor. They seemed like they were moments away from full-blown sex right in the middle of everybody. He cringed. Are you giving that a ride tonight? He asked. He didn't know exactly what he was feeling at this moment, but he knew he was feeling something. Something about this girl. He felt the need to keep talking to her. He tried to think of points of conversation to keep her engaged, but he could tell that she just wanted to leave. No, that was my ride, she said, reaching back into her purse for her phone to find someone to call so they could come pick her up. Ah, John said, nodding slightly. They stood there looking at each other for a moment as something passed between them. They both felt it. It was like a wind that came from both of them and met in the middle, creating a nearly tangible energy that Jenna would swear to this day that she could see. In the times they recalled and discussed this moment between them, Jenna would describe it as a soft, glowing white mass, which John would then argue was just a trick of the lights. Want to get some air? John asked, breaking eye contact and looking towards the door. Yeah, Jenna said. She said it as if she was expecting him to ask that question in those exact words. Outside of the community center was an overflow of people from the reception. It was the people who were either too drunk to dance or too pissed off about something or other and decided that some cool fresh air might help sober them up. John and Jenna instinctively walked past these people and headed to the parking lot where only a few guests had wandered. They stood there for a minute, just taking in the wonderful air and occasionally looking up at the stars. At first, John thought he was the only one looking, but then Jenna said, Sirius looks beautiful tonight. She could always pick out Sirius in the sky because of its constant pulses of blue and red light. She had learned that Sirius was not one star, but two. The celestial bodies were destined to orbit each other for all time, phasing in and out of harmony and showing the universe that two bodies, no matter how great, can live together from a distance and appear as a singular being. John was impressed that she recognized the star, and even more impressed that she knew its name. He looked over and spotted the star. It was beautiful. It may have been the absence of light pollution, but John would swear that it was bigger somehow. A whole 2 minutes passed as they looked up into the heavens. I'm sorry your night was terrible, John said, still looking into the sky. It's all right, Jenna said. I've had worse. Come to think of it, so have I, John said. It wasn't all bad, though, Jenna said as she pulled something round from her purse. She held it out, and John saw that it was one of the painted records from the wedding. He looked closely at it and read the name Jill there. Is that you? Are you Jill? John asked. Jenna laughed at this. No, my name is Jenna, she said, making eye contact again. Can you believe they had the nerve to paint over a Bowie record? She said in heat and disgust. I think I could clean it up and make it playable again. It's just water-based acrylic paint, but still, she said, caressing the record like a baby. Sorry for being so short with you earlier. I just didn't think today would turn out the way it did, she said. It's all right, I understand. And those assholes destroying Bowie like that? Man, I need new friends, John said as he stuck his hand in his pocket and found his car keys. Do you need a ride? I wouldn't mind, John said, hoping she'd say yes so they could talk more. He didn't have any plans after tonight. He just wanted to go home and unwind. Oh, I was gonna call someone, Jenna said. It's kinda late though, isn't it? She said. I don't want to bother anyone. You sure you wouldn't mind? She asked. John's heart was beating out of his chest now, and his hands became sweaty around his keys. No, not at all, he said, trying to contain his excitement. Suddenly he found himself spewing out words he didn't know he was going to say. You can say no to this, but I just got the Lord of the Rings box set on Blu-ray, and I haven't seen those movies since they came out. Do you think you'd like to come watch with me? Maybe we can continue our astronomy conversation." There it was. He had just asked her out on a date. Now that the words were out, he couldn't take them back. They floated through the air at an unstoppable speed into Jenna's ears, and now it was Jenna's heart which was beating out of her chest. She didn't have to give it a second thought. "Okay," she said simply. And that was that. They'd been inseparable ever since. They just had too much in common. As corny as it sounds, they regularly finished each other's sentences and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. In John's eyes, there was no better person on the face of the earth than Jenna. In Jenna's eyes, there was no better person on the face of the earth than John. Some may call it the honeymoon phase. They just called it love. Plain and simple. Thank you for joining me for this reading of Across the Creek. If you like what you heard, drop by my Patreon page and consider supporting me. It will enable me to continue writing and giving you the stories that come from my mind and anything else that might come out of there. Sometimes I don't even know what's going to come out of there. I have lots more to give you and lots more to tell. Thank you.